They had thought it through carefully. It was early morning in the temple courts, the time when Jesus taught the crowds who gathered around him. The Pharisees and teachers of the law had been watching him for weeks, looking for a moment to discredit him, to neutralize the influence that was pulling people away from their authority and toward this teacher from Galilee. They found their moment, or more precisely, they arranged their moment. They brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They made her stand before the group, and they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" The trap from their perspective was airtight. If Jesus said stone her, he would be endorsing execution under Roman occupation, where only Roman authorities had the power of capital punishment, and would be seen by the crowds as a harsh, merciless man. If Jesus said let her go, he would be breaking the law of Moses and could be denounced as someone who did not take Scripture seriously. Either answer destroyed him. But notice something about the scene before we go any further. The law that the Pharisees cited, Leviticus 20 and Deuteronomy 22, specified that both the man and the woman caught in adultery were to be punished. Both of them. The woman was standing in front of Jesus. The man was nowhere in the story. They had not brought the man. They had found a woman, used her body and her humiliation as a weapon in an argument, and left behind whoever she had been with because he was either complicit in the setup or simply deemed less useful as a prop. The trap was not about justice. It was about politics. And the woman was standing there in public in the temple, having been physically dragged from wherever she was found, accused and exposed and placed in the center of a crowd as bait. Jesus looked at the scene, at the Pharisees with their carefully constructed question, at the crowd watching to see what he would do, at the woman in the middle of all of it, and he bent down and wrote in the dust with his finger. This is one of the most studied moments in the entire New Testament. The Gospel of John simply says he bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. It does not tell us what he wrote. It is the only recorded instance of Jesus writing anything. For 2,000 years, scholars, theologians, and ordinary readers have speculated about what the words in the dust said. Some have suggested he wrote the sins of the accusers, that each man watched his own failures appear in the dust at his feet. Some have suggested he wrote the text of the very law they were citing, to force them to acknowledge they had not followed its requirements about bringing both parties. Some have suggested he wrote nothing in particular, that the act of writing was itself the response, a deliberate pause, a refusal to be rushed into the trap, a moment of profound calm in the middle of a deliberately manufactured crisis. The Pharisees kept pressing him for an answer. And Jesus stood up and said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And he bent down again and continued writing. At those words, they began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. One at a time, starting with the oldest, which means starting with the ones who had lived long enough to accumulate the most evidence against their own claim to moral authority. The oldest men in the group heard those words, "Let him who is without sin," and turned and walked away first, and then the next, and then the next, until the sound of sandals retreating across the stone floor of the temple courts had faded and there was silence. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." These two sentences are one of the most precise and complete articulations of grace in the entire Bible. Neither do I condemn you, complete pardon, full acquittal, no conditions placed before the mercy is extended. And then go and leave your life of sin, not a condition of the forgiveness, but a call to a different future made possible by the forgiveness already given. The order is not, clean up your life and then I will not condemn you. The order is, I do not condemn you, therefore you can clean up your life. The grace comes first. The transformation follows. What Jesus did in that temple courtyard was refuse both options in the trap. He did not endorse stoning her. He did not dismiss the moral weight of what she had done. He did something more difficult and more radical. He separated condemnation from accountability. He protected her life without pretending the situation had no moral dimension. He held both truths at once, and he did it by turning the question back on the questioners, not with a theological argument, not with a counter-accusation, with a sentence that invited each person in the crowd to do the one thing we least like to do: look honestly at themselves before judging someone else. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. There are entire sermons in that sentence. There are entire ethical frameworks. There is a complete answer to nearly every online argument, every public shaming, every social media pile-on, every moment when a crowd assembles around a fallen person and picks up whatever is closest to throw. The older ones left first. The people who had lived long enough to know that their hands were not clean either. The younger ones followed, because in the end, when you strip away the crowd's energy and the politics and the performance of righteousness, a person alone with their own conscience, and that sentence has very little choice but to put down whatever they were holding and walk away. Only Jesus was left, the only one in the history of that courtyard who could have thrown a stone and been fully justified, the only sinless one present, and he chose not to. Neither do I condemn you. The woman whose name we are never given, who was dragged through the streets as a tool, whose humiliation was weaponized for a debate she had no part in, who stood in the middle of a crowd fully expecting to die, walked out of that temple courtyard alive and free. 2,000 years later, we still do not know what Jesus wrote in the dust. The words were temporary. The ground absorbed them. By the next rainfall, they were gone. But what he said to the woman who was still standing when everyone else had left, that has never been forgotten. And for anyone watching this right now who has been standing in the middle of their own courtyard, waiting for the stones, those words are still true. Has no one condemned you? Neither do I.